Okay, so we're moving in here onto the stem of these grapes, but let me just very, very quickly. I'm sure if you've watched my recent video on my YouTube channel, you will have already have gathered what happened over Christmas and the reason why I have been so late in getting this second part out for this video, for this Patreon tutorial. I just can't apologize to you guys enough. You deserve much, much better from this service, and all I can do is apologize to you guys. When I got this COVID, as so many people have done over the Christmas holidays and what have you, it just wiped me out completely. And even when I was testing like negative for it, I didn't have it anymore. There was a tiredness and a weakness that came over me, which I can only liken to how I felt like weeks after my initial spinal injury, and I just didn't want to get up and move about. I couldn't move about and that type of thing, no matter how much my mind was telling me to get up and move about. That was kind of the way I felt. But I'm back at it. I'm trying as hard as I can to catch up. I've done a few videos now. I'm absolutely shattered, but it's important to me to get these out to you guys, because I know you guys are incredibly patient with me, and it's actually that reason that keeps me working so hard, because you deserve much better. Anyway, so let's get on with the tutorial here. By the way, this part of the tutorial, I'm going to put this second part up on YouTube just to give people an idea as to what's going on over here on Patreon, in case other people want to join the Patreon account. I just want to show them what's going on, but obviously the people in YouTube are only going to get this second part. So it's not like you guys here on Patreon have paid for a service that you could ordinarily have got over on YouTube just for nothing. It's just this one part. The other parts will still stay on Patreon. So one of the things I liked about doing this stem here is, if you look at the original image, there's a lot of shadow. So the way the light is coming down onto the grapes, there's lots of shadow, giving the stem a lot of depth. So because of the shadow, you can tell that the stem is kind of like intertwined over each other. It's kind of like tangled up, and I really, really like that about this particular piece. And when I first started doing the stems, I thought, because of the greens that was in this particular set, because when I completed this drawing, it was actually originally for a review of the Phoenix colored pencils, which were gorgeous pencils. I loved them. And they had a set of greens in there that was just gorgeous, and so that was why I wanted to do this. And the greens that I had in that set allowed me to capture these shadows really, really well, and I think I was really happy the way the grapes came out. I tried to do grapes once before, like red grapes that have got this kind of like grey powdery texture to them that looks like, in any case, and I failed miserably, and so I tried it the second time round, and I was really happy with the way the grapes came out, but I was much happier with the way the stem came out, because I know it can be tricky whenever you're doing things like this, whenever you're putting shadows down. But one of the things that you've got to remember, and I say this on a regular basis, is that when you're doing any piece, your values are so important. And I used to hear artists saying this, and it never really resonated with me, how important your values are. And what I mean by that is, if there's a part of the drawing that is nice and dark, make sure you get it really dark. And a part of the drawing where there's a highlight, make sure the highlight is nice and bright. I'm going to do a video where I'm going to show you the difference between a drawing that is done with weak values and a drawing that is done with good values. Just so that other people can look at it and see the difference between it. And they're both my own drawings, by the way. They were drawings I did way back. I did a drawing of a tiger when I first started, and when I finished that drawing, I thought to myself, it was really good. I was really happy with it and what have you. But obviously, as the years went on and I learnt more about coloured pencils and what you can achieve with them and that type of thing, my son always kept saying to me, "Dad, you got to do that tiger again, because your art has improved so much. Try that tiger again." And I put it off, and then I eventually got round to doing it. And the difference between the two drawings, and I'm not saying that the second drawing is perfect, because it's not, but if you look at both drawings, you'll definitely be able to see the difference between a drawing where the values are flat. In other words, it's just kind of like the same orange, same black, same everything right across the board. There's no gradient, there's no build up in depth or anything like that. And then the other one. So I'll try and get a video where I can get that together and put that up. But as you can see here, one of the key elements about doing this particular drawing is making sure, especially when it comes to these shadows underneath, look at your reference image and try to just look at it as shapes. I say that an awful lot on these tutorials, but rather than looking at it and saying, right, okay, this is a stem and it's going over this way or it's going over that way. Coda's just talking there as well to you all. If you try to look at it just as shapes, do the shapes that you see, and it might look halfway through it like it just isn't coming together, but if you keep working at it and you keep laying down the colors, putting your values in, making sure that the shapes are right, you refine everything, it will eventually come and you will eventually get it. But one thing you mustn't do is get halfway through and kind of like go, this isn't looking right, and just scrap it, because every artist will tell you that no matter how good an artist you are, no matter how wonderful your art is, they all get to that point where halfway through a drawing, or maybe not even that far, maybe a third of the way through the drawing or something like that, or a quarter of the way through, you just think nothing's going right and it looks rubbish, and you want to just put an end to it and try and start over again. You can do that if you want, but I guarantee you, if you start over again, you may not get to the same point, but at some point in that drawing, you're going to get to the same feeling that it's looking rubbish. And that's natural, it's normal. That's why it's important to try your best and keep working through that voice in the back of your head that's saying, this isn't working out right, just bin it and try it again. It doesn't matter how many times you try it, you're going to get to the same point. You're going to get to a certain point in your drawing and you're going to think it's not working out right. Very rarely will an artist get to a point in a drawing and think that the whole way through it, it's just looking amazing. But if you do, well, then that's a bonus. So as you can see here, I am just making sure that, because what you got to remember is, so these stems are round. So we've got to make sure that we portray the illusion that they're round. So the highlight is, when you look at your reference image, you look at where the highlight is on the stem. Because the stems are twisted amongst each other, the highlights aren't always the same. So look at the highlight, and then on the edges, make sure it's just a little bit darker, just to give it that little bit of illusion that it's round. On these little bits here, the little where the stem meets the actual grape, again, make sure that you are looking at the shapes that are on there, because there's little highlighted areas and there's darker areas. Just try to make sure that you follow those shapes and make sure that you're putting in the the darker areas, and the darker areas will always tend to be where the actual stem touches the grape, and then it fades out. And you can see also as well where I've done the shadow bit underneath on kind of like around where the shadow is, the stem is really like that bright grass green. Well, it's that contrast, those values between the brightness and the darkness of the shadow that helps kind of show whoever's looking at it, give them the illusion. Their eyes and their brain will do the work for you. Those values that their eyes and their brain is interpreting will tell them this is a three-dimensional object, and the stem is all twisted around each other and what have you, as opposed to just having it all flat. It's not going to work that way. So you can see here I'm using this lilac. So this is where, for anybody watching this on YouTube, watching the first part is a little bit important, because I talk in the first part about how to get this kind of like lilac-y grey powdery texture that you can see on the reference image. When you're looking at the reference image, these are, what are called red grapes, but there's that kind of lilac-y grey powdery texture that's on the grapes, on the skin of the grapes, and it was always that part that I found really difficult to get. But with the colours that were available to me in this particular set, and by the way, you don't have to have this Phoenix set just to do this particular drawing. You can have any colours, any pencils you want, because a lot of the colours that are in this Phoenix set are available in nearly every set of colour pencils that you're going to be able to get, especially if it's like a 36 set and above. But I'm using here to get this on the grapes. There are parts of the grapes where there's this kind of like reddy brown colour, and so I'm using like this burnt orange, which gives you that reddy brown colour. And then you'll see me coming back in again with like lighter pinks, lilacs, and some reds as well. Now, if you're watching this on YouTube, I try to avoid giving over on the Patreon channel. I try to avoid telling people exactly what colours I've used to get the final result. And the reason why I do that is because the colours that I see on the reference image may not be exactly the same colours that you see. And so I could steer you wrong. You've got to look at your reference image, and you've got to look at the colours that your eyes can see, and then select the colours accordingly. The colours I see, the colours you see, and the colours somebody else see are all going to be different. So I personally don't agree with, putting the colours up on these tutorials. I think it guides you in the wrong way. I think it's important that you select the colours that you see, and you do the drawing that way. What I'm doing here really is just showing you, maybe sharing with you different tips and techniques that I use whenever I do my drawings. It's a lot more about tips and techniques and little ideas that I've come up with, and less about the colours that I'm using, because it's incredibly important that you use your own visual representation to draw your own art, rather than me tell you what colours I think you should be selecting. So you can see here, right, with this particular grape, I've put down that lilac-y color, but it doesn't look right because it's too bright. So I'm coming in here now with a lighter pink, and I'm going back over that lilac-y color just to darken it down a little bit, and you'll start to see that it's starting to blend in now. I know sometimes the light like washes it out a little bit, but when you see it, you'll be able to get a better view. So I'm coming back in here with this orange, and then you'll see I'm using like a reddy brown color, just to get the deeper colors in the red area of this particular grape. So coming back in here with a slightly darker, like purple, but I'm being very light when I'm doing these grapes individually. I'm still being very light with my layers and just building up. It's a lot easier to use multiple layers to build up to where you want it to be, rather than going in heavy-handed right at the very beginning and perhaps trying to remove color. See, it's easier to remove a layer of color if you're light. If your layers are light, you can use like a putty eraser or something like that, and it'll help to remove a few layers. Whereas if you go in dead heavy-handed and you push down the tooth of the paper, and you need to maybe just lift out a little bit, maybe make a color a little bit lighter, because you've pushed down heavy, the putty eraser may not lift out the level of color that you need. So I know it can be frustrating. I know one of the things about colored pencil art is that it can be very, very time consuming. It can take an awful long time, and sometimes for some people, they're just not prepared to dedicate that amount of time to draw on something. But if you are happy enough with that, if you do have a little bit of patience, I promise you that building up with lighter layers, building up that way, will give you the results that you want. Alternatively, if you just don't have the patience, but you still really want to use colored pencils, I do have a tutorial on my Patreon channel where I've used markers, alcohol markers, and colored pencils. That's a much, much faster way of getting to a final result. There's obviously a lot more, not a lot more, but there's different hurdles that you've got to overcome when you're using marker and colored pencil together. So hopefully I'm able to show you those on that tutorial. But if you're not very patient and you do want to just you know in your head what colors you need, you just want to get the colors down, and then you just want to refine it a little bit with your colored pencils, then perhaps marker and colored pencil is the best way to go. That's the one thing I love about using markers and colored pencils, is the fact that the markers do give you that instant layer of color, and then you can come back in again with colored pencils and refine that area that you've done by putting in your shadows, and even going back over when you go over marker with white colored pencils, the results are quite favorable. So again, using this kind of like burnt orangey color here, and again, you've just got to keep looking at your reference image. It all depends on which grape you're doing. Some grapes are really, really dark, much, much darker in color, and others have got more of they almost look translucent. There's there's quite a translucent feel to them. The reference, I selected this reference image because I loved the way that it was just the grapes on a white background. There was no other like trees or wooden table or anything like that on the drawing. It was just these grapes and this brilliant white light coming down onto it, which, when I looked at the reference image, the reason I liked it so much was because of the stems of the grapes and the way that they were twisted and give you those shadows, but also as well the grapes themselves, the shadows that they cast on the white surface and the different colors of those shadows. I found that really interesting as well. And then obviously the grapes themselves, some of the grapes were really, really dark, and then some of the other grapes had that kind of almost translucent look to them. So I wanted to try and be able to do all of that in the drawing. Originally not thinking that the drawing was going to be for a Patreon tutorial, because I didn't think it was going to come out as well as it did. I was really happy with the way it came out. But once it came out, I was fairly confident that it would be that I would be able to turn it into a decent tutorial. So again here, just nice light layers, just building up. And with these grapes as well, when you're looking at the grapes individually, it's almost like looking at a map of the world. You know, like when you're looking down at a map of the world and you can see the oceans, and then you can see the different continents and what have you, and they're all different shapes. Well, when you're looking at these grapes, you've got these patches of like red, and then you've got these bigger patches of like this lilac-y grey color. So it's just a case of trying to be as accurate as you can. But the beauty of this is, because it is a grape, because it's a natural thing, it grows, and so therefore these shapes are so different. You don't always have to be exact. We're not going for hyper realism here or anything like that, although you could do that if you wanted to. But for this particular drawing, hyper realism isn't what I was aiming at. I was just aiming at trying to make sure that the drawing turned out and it looked like, I said, a bunch of grapes, as opposed to my first attempt at this, which, well, let's not say what it looked like, but I'm sure you can imagine. So you can see here, I'm using the white pencil. Now I'm not burnishing here or anything like that. I'm just using the white pencil to kind of mix those lilac-y, pinky colors together. So I'm not pushing down hard on that white pencil when I was doing that. Now this area here that I'm working at, you can see there's a shadow there that is really, really purple. Try not to pay too much attention to that, because I do come back to this and I do rectify this, because the shadow is not that color, and I don't know what happened to me. I don't know why I made it that color, but I do tone it down a little bit with the white pencil, and the white pencil does work really well to tone it down. You know, when we use a white pencil, it's not always to get highlights with or anything like that. You can use your white pencil to help the process of getting all those light layers that you've applied beforehand, using the white pencil just to kind of like mix them together, just to help that process, that mixing process along just a little bit. And when you're using a white pencil like that, you know, still use a light hand, a light touch, I know a lot of people, you can use the white pencil to burnish colours together, like, which is really heavy-handed, and it's really kind of like when you burnish something, it's normally your final layer, because you're using heavy pressure and the tooth of the paper is going to be pretty much eradicated after you've burnished it. But you can still use, like I say, a light hand with the white pencil, and it's still going to give you those like nice mixing traits. So you can see here with some of these grapes as well, so the light is obviously coming from above, and the underside of this grape is a little bit darker, and it almost like looks like that ordinarily you wouldn't put like a line round the bottom of this grape or around the grape, because you don't really see your line work or anything like that. But depending on how the shadows are, depending on where the light is, the underside of this particular grape that we're working on now does, if you look at your reference image, it is a little bit darker, and it's coming from shadow more than anything else. So I'm using like a warm grey here for this particular shadow, but I do add colour to it as well, because there is colour in these shadows. But one thing you'll find when you're going through your work and you're doing a piece, the more colour you add, the darker your values get or what have you. It may make another piece, another part of the piece that you're drawing look a little bit strange, and so it's okay to go back. So like if you start adding more color and making a certain part of your drawing darker, another part that you had originally thought looks really, really good might start to be pushed back a little bit because of the darkness of the other part of the drawing. It's okay to jump about and to, rectify those mistakes, add a little bit of colour, lift a little bit of colour out, anything like that. You'll see me do that a lot in my drawings, where I will go back to like the beginning of the drawing where I started. I will jump back to that, because as I am adding more and more colour, more and more contrast and what have you, it's important that I keep looking at where I started and make sure that it's still in line with everything else that I'm adding down. So you can see there a relatively light layer for these shadows, but I will come back in again and add a little bit of like a lilac-y colour and stuff like that. Because if you look at your shadows, there is colour, especially with this being red grapes. The light that is shining down is going to add a little bit of colour to those shadows. Shadows are never just like, like dark grey or black or anything like that. There's always colour in shadows. So that purple that you see me using earlier on, and then this kind of like bubblegum pink, blending those colours together helps me to get this powdery grey colour that I'm looking for. But I will dare say, if you have a different set of pencils, like the 120 set of the Faber-Castell Polychromos, or the what do you call it, Prismacolor, maybe the 150 set of the Prismacolor. There's a lot of colours in those sets, especially that Prismacolor set that's got those beautiful light lilac-y grey colours. They would be perfect for this particular drawing. And it just all depends what you have. I didn't have, when it came to these grey lilac-y colours, I didn't have the exact colour that I needed from the Phoenix set, but I was able to create it using other pencils and using, like I say, a light layering technique. You can see here as well that I'm coming back in here with this orangey brown colour, and I'm making sure that where the darker red parts are, that they're not that they blend in with the lilac-y grey parts. What I don't want is for the red parts to almost be like, like line work, so that they are completely separate from the reddy grey parts, or the lilac-y grey parts, because that's not the case. When you look at your reference image, they kind of like blend and merge into each other very, very gently. But so it's important that you make that transition on your drawing as well, like I'm doing here now. I'm using this orange to pull back in a little bit of that purple and pink to create that lilac-y grey. Now I'm coming back in here with this white, and where the lilac-y grey parts of the grape are, this white is allowing me to pull that purple and that pinky colour together, and the white is allowing me to push it back a little bit. So you can see, this is just a pencil eraser, and when I'm coming in to do these grapes, I just want to get rid of those lines, those graphite lines, because the grapes, anytime that you're drawing something like a botanical piece, it shouldn't really have hard lines or anything like that. It should just, when you're doing like anime or manga or something like that, and you use like a fine liner to create your lines, that's fine in that particular style of drawing. But when you're doing something like a botanical piece, something natural that is grown, there doesn't tend to be definitive hard lines on those drawings. So it's important that you, when you're doing it, like in this case here with these grapes, we want to remove those hard lines, those hard graphite lines, and just go up to the edges with the colour and allow the colour to finalise the draw. So we're working on this this big grape down at the bottom here, and there's a little bit of shadow on it. But the majority of this grape is kind of like a burnt orangey colour. That's the way I see it. And it's got a highlighted bit right in the middle. And so it's important that you maintain that highlight. I mean, like, a lot of people will come in, again, they'll just work over this and they'll come in with, I don't know, white gouache or a white pen or something like that and create that highlight. For big things like this, I try to stay away from that. I try to allow the white of the paper to be the highlight and work my way out. That way I feel I have a little bit more control when I'm creating that highlight, so it doesn't just look like a white blob in the center of it. But that's, I guess that's why, you know, we all watch different artists and we all watch how they all do their different things, because somebody's technique might apply to the way you do your drawing a lot. You might be able to relate a lot better to it than other people's. I don't mind using white gel pens or Posca pens or anything like that if the highlight of the eye is just like literally a little dot. But when it's something slightly bigger like this, and I have a little bit more room to work with, and you can see that it's a highlight, and so therefore the center part of it is quite bright, but it radiates out, and you need that kind of like that ghosting highlight around the outsides of it to show that it is something shining. I prefer to use the white of the paper and try and work my way around that. Here, I'm just, if you look at the reference image on this particular grape, right down at the bottom of it, there's a little bit of shadow there from the grapes above it. But this shadow here is kind of like a really dark reddy brown color. So I'm using that orange, that burnt orange, and you can see here I've got like a really nice rust red or reddy brown color, which is helping me to create that that shadow under on that grape from the grapes above it. And you can see how I'm going to now contradict myself slightly here, because you can see where those shadows are. It's kind of like on the grape beside it, it looks like a hairline of a Playmobil person. And there's a definitive line where the shadow stops. So going back to what I was just saying to you, and now I'm confusing the hell out of you, I'm guessing. Where I said in the past, you know, don't use definitive lines and stuff like that. But where this shadow is, it is creating a definitive line between the shadow and the grape. So you've just got to try and do your best and create what you see here. Now I'm using a lighter orange because when I come back, I can see when I'm looking at, see, this comes back down to why I prefer not to tell you exactly what colors I'm using, because on this grape I can see a lot of orange in it, and I can see slightly darker oranges, but you may not see that. So I think it's important that you select the colors that you do. One of the things I always suggest when anybody is going to do a new art piece is, before you even get started, select the reference image that you want and study that reference image. And look at the reference image and think to yourself, what parts of this particular piece do you think you're going to have an issue with? And let's just say, for argument's sake, it's the shadow on the stems. What I suggest you do is, before you even get started on your piece, is try and create just that little piece, like the stem with a little bit of shadow underneath it and stuff like that, on a scrap piece of paper, preferably similar paper to what you're going to use. But nevertheless, if you don't want to use that, just a scrap piece of paper, and try to create it so that when it comes to doing that part, you're not fiddling about, or you're not, it's not trial and error on the actual drawing. You've done all your trial and error on a scrap piece of paper, where it doesn't matter. But the fact that you've studied your reference image as well will allow you to select your colors. Now, one of the things I do when I'm doing these drawings, if I'm really not sure what colors, like with the grapes, okay, so because I always found it really difficult getting this grey, powdery color to it, I uploaded the image into Photoshop or something similar to that. Use the color selector and touch the areas that you're not sure what color it's going to be, and it'll come up on Photoshop and it'll tell you what the color is. What I do then is try to select a pencil or a color that I have in my set that is closest to that. And that's one of the tips and techniques. That's one of the ways I try to, if I'm doing a drawing and I want it to be as close to the actual image as possible, that's one of the things I will do. Upload the reference image into Photoshop, select the different areas that I need to find out exactly what color it is, and allow Photoshop to help me with those little bits. If you don't want to do that, if you don't have Photoshop or anything like that, then you just lift out your pencils, the ones that you have, the ones that you're going to use for the piece, and just create like a swatch on a scrap piece of paper. Get the colors that are closest to look at your reference image, get the colors that are closest to what you see on the reference image, and then have those colors out. Don't sit with your entire pencil collection out, because that's only going to overcomplicate things. If you can do the drawing in having 10 colors in front of you, then do it in 10 colors. Don't think that if you do it in 10 colors, it makes you less of an artist or anything silly like that. If you can do it in 10 colors, you do it in 10 colors. If you need more, then fine. But try to get those colors before you start, so that you're sat with everything you need right in front of you, and you're not then jumping up halfway through the drawing looking for another color or anything like that. And that's where it comes down to a little bit of time and a little bit of preparation before you start. I guarantee you that it will save you time in the long run, and it's also going to save you from making a lot of mistakes or anything like that. So you can see here now, I'm using this kind of like lemony color, because down at the bottom of this particular grape, where the highlight is, just underneath it, there's kind of like a yellow ochre spot on it. Now, I don't know whether that's coming from light or whether it's just part of the grape, but I used a little bit of yellow there on top of the orange that I'd already put down. So the yellow is quite bright, but on top of the orange, it blends in, and it gives you like that yellow ochre type color. So I'm using the white pencil here now, and all that's doing is making sure that the highlight that's in the grape isn't just like a white blob. I'm pulling in the color from around the highlight, so like that reddy orangey color, and I'm kind of like pulling it in gently towards the center of the highlight, not all the way into the center, but just to give that that halo effect, that ghosting effect. You'll notice here that all the way through this drawing, my pencils are really, really sharp. And the reason why that is because the sharper your pencil, the more control you have when you're doing these light layers. If your pencil isn't really sharp and it's quite dull, it's really going to be difficult to create light layers and to create an even layer whenever you're laying down a complete layer. Sorry, excuse me. So I'm coming in here now with this reddy orange on top of the warm grey colour that I had originally put down there for the shadow. Because like as I was saying to you, there is colour in these shadows. Just blending everything in here, just making sure everything is kind of like uniform. It's not blotchy, because if you look at the shadow, there's the vast majority of the shadow areas are just kind of like it looks like just one layer. So I'm being a little bit more heavy-handed here on these final layers when it comes to the shadows. And I know I've said this multiple times, but it's always, I know I say it about when you're doing your drawing, to study your reference image beforehand and to, look at any bits that you think you might have trouble with. But it's also really super important that you, as you're actually drawing your piece, that you're constantly looking at your reference image. It's your reference image is so important. This is why a lot of artists will say that when people come to them with a photograph of a loved one or a dog or something like that they would like this artist to do, whether it's a pastel painting of, an oil painting, or colour pencil painting. People who often bring these photographs to us will be like a photograph from the 70s, which is all blurry and all grainy and stuff like that, and it makes the job of trying to recreate that image so difficult. I know a lot of artists that will just turn the person away and just say no way, because they're not prepared to tarnish their reputation by doing something that isn't very good, but that's down to mainly how terrible the reference image is. And that's not saying to anybody that the dog the photograph of the dog's a horrible dog or anything like that. That's not what their artist is saying. They're just saying that the reference image is not clear enough. I had a person, a family member, asked me to do a drawing of their dogs. It was actually my mother and father-in-law, and I kept saying to them, I need better photographs. And what they thought I meant by that initially was that the dogs weren't posing right for the photo. And I was like, no. What I need is I need the dog to be still, and I need you to take a photograph that isn't shaky, that is in focused, and that I can zoom in on in certain areas without the image being distorted too much. So checking your reference image all the way through it and making sure you have a good image as well is so important, really is. That's why for a lot of things, a lot of artists, especially if you're going to be doing botanical art or like pet portraitures or something like that, it's probably beneficial for the artist to be a good photographer, because for you to go out, take a photograph of the animal that a friend wants you to draw for them or something like that, is probably more in your favor if you do things that way. Or if you, like in the case of botanical art, and you've set up like a nice flower arrangement that you want to draw or something like that, making sure that you've got a good camera that you can create good photographs is going to help you much, much better than somebody handing you an image. And I know that, and also if you're taking photographs yourself, it wipes out any copyright infringements that can come down on you later on down the line as well, because that is a huge problem for many artists, doing drawings in this day and age. So you can see there now I've finished the shadow part of that, and in all fairness, that last part there, that last shadow part that I've done, that actually could have been lighter. I should have maybe done that a little bit lighter and not quite as dark, but nevertheless, it was a mistake that I made. So we're coming back in here now with the stalks, and again I've got this darker green here, this dark olive green. And I'm creating some shadows, but this time the shadows from the stalk are actually on the grape. So you can see I'm coming alongside here the stem, but this part is actually on the grape. This shadow's on the grape. So although I put that dark green down, I'm coming back in here with this reddy brown color for that shadow area. We're coming up towards the end of this second part of the grapes. So basically, if you are watching this on YouTube, if you would like to find out what all the different tutorials that I have over on Patreon, you can go across, click on the link down below, and it'll take you across to my Patreon channel. Now, the way I have Patreon set up is a little bit different than the way a lot of people do. A lot of people have different tiers on Patreon, and the more you pay, the more access you get to the tutorials and what have you, or you'll get like little additional things sent out to you from the artist. I've tried not to do that, and I've tried to leave the amount of money you pay for these tutorials down to you. So basically, the tiers that I've set up are $2 tier, $5, $10 and $15, but the $2 tier gets you exactly the same as the $15 tier. So in other words, anybody who pays $2 is going to get full access to all of the tutorials, and the same person that pays $15 is going to get full access to the tutorials as well. The reason I've done it like that is because I only set Patreon up because I got a lot of requests from people saying, Harry, you should try to make a little bit of money out of this for yourself, and let us make donations to you, but in a safe way to do it. And so I set up the Patreon channel, and so that's all it is basically. If you can afford to pay £15 a month for these tutorials, then you do that. But if you can't, then $2 is all Patreon would allow me to go down to. That's the lowest Patreon would allow me to charge. So that's the way I've set it up, and like I say, I've set it up for a reason that way. Some people can afford more money than others, and I didn't want to put these tutorials out and put them out of reach of other artists, whether it be the younger artists that are coming up, or student artists, or anything like that, people who are financially struggling. I didn't want these tutorials to be out of reach from them. So that's the way my Patreon channel is set up. Now the two tutorials that I have on YouTube here, which is an hour of the marker one and an hour of these grapes. When you sign up, or if you sign up to Patreon, then you will get the remaining parts, like part 1 and part 2 and part 3, and I think with the marker one, part 4, you'll get all the parts, and you'll be able to do the full tutorial. But like I say, there are other tutorials over there. So if you've seen my graphite drawing of the ballet shoes, that's over there. The drawing of the tiger, that's over there as well. And there's a few other things over there that I've done over the last year or so. This year, I'm hoping, and I'm with all the different things that I have planned for the channel, I'm hoping to be adding a lot more tutorials to Patreon. But that's the plan in any case, and so hopefully that'll pan out okay. But if you want to go across and just, have a look around the Patreon channel, please by all means do so. Just select the link down below, and you can go across, take a look. Don't forget, like I say, if you do the $2 tier, you're going to have access to exactly the same as what the $15 tier does. And I don't want anybody thinking who is paying $15 that you're going to get more than the $2 tier, because you're not. It's exactly the same. It's just, I want it to be even. I want everybody to have the same thing. The tiers are just there. If you feel that you want to donate, it's actually basically just a donation thing. So if you think that you want to be able to donate a little bit more to what I'm doing here at the Art Gear Guide, because then if you can afford it, it's greatly appreciated. And everything that I get from Patreon or any of the other Google payments that I get or anything like that, it all goes straight back into the channel. Giveaways, things like that. And more products to review, because I do get products from companies, but not all the time. So I have to make sure that I always have products here to review, and especially the quirky products that I try to find as well. I try to make sure that I'm reviewing products that maybe you've not heard of. I want to try and make sure that the Art Gear Guide is the biggest catalogue of product reviews for artists online at some point. Hopefully it'll get there, but that's the intent for the channel in any case. I used to, when I was doing these tutorials, I used to just put up a 3-hour long tutorial, but with a lot of the Patreon subscribers already over there, it was kind of deemed that it's better to do, if I do a 4-hour tutorial, to put them up in 1-hour blocks, because it's easier then for the people that are trying to follow along with the tutorials to navigate those 1-hour blocks. I don't think Patreon doesn't really work the same way YouTube does, where you can stop a video and then come back to it at exactly the same point. But nevertheless, it seems to be working for the Patreon subscribers that are already subscribed. These putting it up in these 1-hour blocks. And like I say, a lot of the tutorials over there at the minute are colored pencil tutorials and graphite tutorials. But I do plan on, when I get a little bit better, doing some watercolor tutorials. I've got a pastel tutorial to put up because I know I'm okay with pastels. And I also want to do some more marker and colored pencil tutorials. So I've got lots of different ideas, lots of different tutorials that I plan on putting up there. So anyway, guys, that's the end of part 2. If you're watching this on YouTube, go across to Patreon, sign up, and you can get part 1 and part 3 and finish this tutorial off. If you're here on Patreon, I will have part 3 up in the next week or so. Thank you, and I look forward to seeing you all again in part 3. Bye.